Hi folks, I'm Madeline G, and welcome to a very important installment of Ride With Me. It is crucial that we know the facts about people's rights when they are detained by ICE and what parents have to do in order to assign a legal guardian in the event they may be deported. Because if the proper steps are not taken, the children will be placed in foster care. On March 13th, the LA Times reported that assigning a power of attorney would be sufficient enough to assign a guardian if a parent or parents are deported. But that is not true for all states, specifically California. Here to clarify and break it down is CEO and President of Bethzedik, Jesse Kornberg. Jesse, thank you for joining us. Bethzedik, if those of you don't know and are from the Los Angeles area, they provide free legal services for low-income individuals and families. Now, Jesse, there's been a lot of confusion in terms of what happens when a family member is detained by ICE, what happens to the kids. Can you please break it down for us and explain to us what's the difference between a guardianship and a power of attorney, and why in the state of California a guardianship supersedes a power of attorney?
In some states, we understand a power of attorney can be helpful for a parent who's been removed and wants to put a caregiving plan in place for their child. We don't recommend a power of attorney for California parents. If you are an undocumented parent and you want to put a caregiving plan in place for your child in the event that you are removed, we would recommend instead to consider guardianship. We think that this is safer because it gives the guardian that you nominate legal authority to make education decisions, to make medical decisions, and to make financial decisions for your child. The power of attorney does not give you that authority. You want to have the person who is here as the safety net for your family to have all of the authority they need. For example, to enroll your child in school in September and not have a school question whether or not they can do that. To take your child to the hospital or to the doctor for vaccines or an emergency procedure and not have the hospital refuse to let that person weigh in on decisions for that child. And not have the foster care system or social workers question whether or not you have a safe caregiving plan for your family. So guardianship offers much more legal authority than a power of attorney, which really doesn't give that person that you've chosen to take care of your child for a short time or a long time any of that power. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do a guardianship now. It's just planning. So what we recommend is that you come to a Know Your Rights presentation. You learn more about what guardianship does and does not do. One thing that's really important about guardianship, it does not terminate your rights as a parent. If you did an adoption or if your child went into foster care, that would affect your rights as a parent. The guardianship does not do that. It protects you as a parent. You can always come back in and say, you know what? I changed my mind. Guardianship no longer makes sense. So that's one protection we think is important. But you don't have to go all the way right now. You just have to start to plan.
And what are the proper steps that people have to take to assign a guardian, a legal guardian?
So what we would recommend after you learn about your options and you decide that guardianship nomination is the right decision for you, there are two pieces of paper that you can fill out. It's called a guardianship nomination form. It does not go to the court. You're not raising your hand to identify your family as one that has this potential problem. It's instead a piece of paper that you keep either private in your home or with us in a file in Bethzedik or another legal services provider. It's just held in a safe place in case you need it. And that is a court form that identifies who you think is the best person to serve as a guardian for your child in case you are removed or unavailable for some reason. The other piece of paper is a caregiving affidavit. And that is like a temporary stopgap measure For people who are in the guardianship process and the guardianship petition has been filed with the court and you're waiting for your hearing, which can take some time, caregiver affidavit gives you a little bit of extra power in those intervening days, weeks, or months, so that the caregiver you've identified, that you nominate in that guardianship form, has this caregiving affidavit that they can take to the doctor, that they can take to school, that says, I am the caregiver that this parent has assigned. Neither document goes to the court right now. Neither document goes really to any authority right now. You keep it private, you keep it safe, you identify a safe place where you and your family know that these documents can be held in the event that you would need them.
Certain people that I've heard are fearful about going through the courts because then they would become targets. So what you're saying is that they don't have to go through the courts, they can fill out the paperwork, and if need be, that's when they can go ahead and contact the family member to pull them out, basically.
That's right. We don't think that there's any reason to go to court now, preemptively, hypothetically. It's just some good planning to put in place. I do want to mention another question that a lot of parents have is, what about my bank account? What about my home? What about my business? Those are separate questions that are not addressed by the guardianship process. So I would recommend that at the same time that you come to us or to another legal service provider to learn more about these family planning options, you also ask those questions. How can I make sure that money I've set aside to provide for my child is handled and protected in the right way? The legal authority to make sure that the dollars you need to either keep your child in school or arrange for your child to meet you wherever you might be, or whatever else might come up, there are good legal protections for your property and for the finances and resources you want to make sure are protected for your family.
And the Supreme Court has repeatedly said that immigrants, those who are here illegally, are protected under the Constitution, specifically the Fifth Amendment, and have a right to due process. What are the rights exactly of people who are detained by ICE?
So you have the right to remain silent, and you can say, I want to exercise my right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse to sign anything that's put in front of you. You have the right to request an attorney. And we would recommend reviewing what is called the ACLU Red Card, which has very specific instructions for what your rights are if you are arrested versus if ICE has asked you a question. There's a difference. If you're arrested by a law enforcement officer, you have a right to counsel paid for by the government. If you are detained by ICE, you have a right to request counsel, but the government won't pay for it. So it can be different depending on the situation you find yourself in. You have a right to refuse law enforcement or ICE entry into your home unless they have a warrant giving them access to your home. If you have a business, you probably have the right to refuse ICE or law enforcement entry to your business unless they have a warrant that authorizes them to come into your business. We recommend reviewing the ACLU Red Card. It goes through these points in detail, and we think that it's advice that you can trust.
And what's the process exactly when someone is detained? What process do they go through? Are they, because there have been reports that people will be detained, maybe held for a day or two, sent back home, and then they have to go through court hearings. Is that how it works?
So there is wide variation, and we think that the answer to that question could be changing even right now. We think that no matter what process is in place, we still recommend the ACLU Red Card. We still recommend that you refuse to answer questions. We still recommend that you refuse to sign anything. We still recommend that you request to speak to a lawyer. In addition to preparing these family planning documents, we recommend that you commit to memory, memorize the phone number that you would call if you had a legal question and were in one of these situations, if you need help identifying an immigration lawyer, you can go to NILC, the National Immigration Law Center, or to the ACLU, who have a list of resources of immigration counsel. If you request a lawyer in a detention setting, they also can provide you with a list of low-cost or free immigration counsel. So that is an option, but better probably to try to identify someone beforehand now and memorize their phone number in case you need it.
Okay. And finally, for people who don't live in California and may need a power of attorney or a guardianship, where can they go about finding this information for their designated states?
Yeah. So we practice in California, and I'm not an expert in the 49 other states, but every state has some legal services provider. The National Immigration Law Center can identify many of those legal services providers on their website, and I would recommend reaching out either to the National Immigration Law Center or to your local legal services provider to confirm whether or not the family planning documents that we've identified will be helpful wherever you live.
Jesse, thank you so much for all this information. Folks, if you'd like to receive pro bono legal aid and you're from a low-income family and you would like to set up a guardianship, the contact for Beth Zedek is in the link below. It is vital that we stay informed. Well, folks, that's it for me. I'm Madeline G, and you've been watching Ride With Me. Till next time, good night.